as a percentage of GDP in South Africa. This is from 1980. That's 1980. You can see that private consumption in South Africa is going up and up as a percentage of GDP. This is household consumption, what you and me buy, our houses, our fridges, our whatever, shoes, shirts, whatever. But if you look at private consumption in China, this is 1978, when the economic reforms were started under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping. If you look, you see what has happened. Private consumption in China has gone from over 50% down to 35%. So the Chinese, it's not that they're eating less, it's that they're producing more. If you look at, for example, what is happening to gross fixed capital formation, which is really the heart of your productive economy, the investment in factories, the investment in your railways, in your roads. I don't know how many of you have been to China, but that's one of the first things that strikes you when you get into the airport in Beijing. Is this massive building which was designed by a British architect, but it works like clockwork. And they developed that for the Olympics. And from there on, you get on a super highway and you can go almost from Beijing to Hong Kong on a highway, and there's high-speed trains and so on. This is what this explains. China's fixed investment is what creates jobs, because then you build railways, you build factories, you build mines, you build. If you look at South Africa's gross fixed investment, it's less than 20%. It has been declining actually from 1980. It leveled off. It went up a little bit. It's now gone down again. Today, it's less than 19% of GDP. So China is sitting at 45% of GDP. In our case, it's sitting at 19% of GDP. The consequence of one of the consumption of South Africa is government consumption. So it's not just households that are consuming, it's also the government. And you can see South Africa's government consumption is around 20%, but China's is less than 15%. So this is why China is really growing at 10% plus its economy, when we in South Africa are sitting at somewhere around about 30%, which is really just reproducing the existing economy. Now, this is an illustration I thought might be of interest to you to show what happens if you don't invest like we are not investing. If you take footwear, in 1991, South Africa made 80 million pairs of shoes, which were actually made by South Africans in South Africa and sold in the South African market. Due to lack of investment, by 2005, we were making a little over 20 million pairs of shoes. So down from 80 million pairs of shoes to 20 million pairs of shoes. And what happened? The balance was the import. By 2005, we were importing 160 million pairs of shoes into South Africa. Now, if you, of course, you can see this steep climb in imports compared going with a steep decline in South Africa's manufacturing of footwear. Now, the consequence of this shows up in employment. In 1997, we had 23,000 people working in the footwear sector in South Africa. By 2006, it had dropped down to 10,000. If you look at 1985, where almost 80% of the footwear sold in South Africa was made in South Africa. By 2005, only 17% of the footwear that we sell in South Africa is made in South Africa. The rest, 83%, is imported. So if you go to an average shoe shop in South Africa to buy shoes, it's very clear. You will not be able to buy a pair of South African shoes. You will be buying imported shoes, imported from. This is really a stark reflection of what happens when you redistribute towards private consumption. You end up consuming more and more imported product, which is the way South Africa is now going. We are importing more and more of what we consume and less of what we produce. If you look at our exports are increasingly becoming exports of minerals and raw materials, and we're importing more and more of manufactured goods. I didn't want to, I could have illustrated to you what has happened to the trade between South Africa and China, what is it that we sell to China, and what is it that China sells to us, but I thought I had depressed you enough. I will not add any more depression in case somebody starts jumping over the cliff or from the window. So, what should we do in South Africa? I think what we should do in South Africa, I've drawn a short list, which is the last illustration I have here, just of what needs to be done for us to engineer the South African economy to become more like a Chinese economy, if you want, to become a more productive economy. We have to raise the level of science. You saw what the Brazilians did. They had to raise their managerial skills, so they had to expand their higher education, and we have to do the same. There is no other way besides that. And what is very critical to understand about South Africa, that if we talk in racial terms, huge part of the entrepreneur class are the people who have to have those skills. If you don't have that, you can't run a business. So a big part of our entrepreneur group comes from the whites and the Indians. If you look at enterprises in South Africa, you will find that is the case. 75% of the top management in this country is white. A big part of the balance is Indian. And then you have a residual African and colored part. So for us to be able to develop this economy, because the Africans and the coloreds are the biggest part of our population, we have to get that population to have more science and maths and management skills, because then they will be able to start new businesses. One of South Africa's biggest inheritances we inherited from the Afrikaner nationalist period is the massive differential in the pay for the upper echelons of our economy and the average worker. So we have to change this balance, because one of the things that this imbalance is doing, it actually raises our unit labor costs. A couple of years ago, I visited a Chinese factory that makes locomotives for, amongst others, the South African mining industry. We sell iron ore to China, and we import railway locomotives from China. Anyway, I visited this factory. The CEO of the factory, this was a factory that employed 10,000 workers. The CEO of this factory was earning an equivalent of 300,000 rands a year. Not a month, a year. He had a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and he was the CEO of this massive plant which was producing world-class locomotives. Some of them they're selling not just to South Africa, to Sudan, to Namibia, to Central Asia, as well as to Germany. So these were high-quality products. This guy was earning 300,000 a year. So I said to him, if he came back with me to South Africa, by the time I land, he would earn 20 times what he's earning in China. Because for a man of his skills in South Africa, he would earn at least 6 million rands, if not 10 million rands. The other day I met a gentleman who is the the CEO of ShopRite Checkers. I was told he earns 64 million rands a year. That is, his name is appropriately Whitey Basson. So it just gives you an idea of what is happening. So we have to, because our main competitor now are the Asian countries. So we cannot have cost structures in South Africa that are totally out of sync with the cost structures in Asia. So we have to bring our cost structures. The way to do this is we have to produce more qualified people so that there is an oversupply of qualified people rather than what we're doing today. We're having an undersupply of qualified people, which then creates this artificial shortage. I read somewhere in the Sunday Times recently that there is a shortage of 850,000 professional jobs in South Africa. So when you have a shortage like that, the price goes through the roof and it creates the problem. We have to change the structure of our economy away from consumption into investment. Now, how are you going to do that? I don't know, but we have to do that. We have the state in South Africa controls the railways and they control power generation. As I pointed out, the public sector does not have the capacity to run the electricity, and we got experience of this in 2008, where we woke up one day and the lights had gone out. What was interesting about that was that 5 years earlier, the government had been told that by 2008, power would run out in South Africa, given the electrification that was going on and the growth in population and so on. They did nothing about it, and we ran out of power, and we still haven't recovered from that. But what is interesting about the little effort that the public sector is making to build new power stations, I don't know if you saw the story that one of these big coal-fired power stations, Hitachi, is going to supply the boilers. But piggybacking on Hitachi, which is a big Japanese engineering company, is an ANC company called Chancellor House. They declare themselves as the BE partner of Hitachi. And I was saying to a friend who lives there somewhere next to where my UB is, which is in Limpopo, that personally, if I were him, living next to a boiler installed by the ANC, I would move house. Because that is going to blow up. Now, you have to see the size of a power station boiler. Now, if that blows up, or if all 6 of them blow up, it'll be like an atom bomb that goes up. But anyway, let's hope that Hitachi does the installation of my friends in the ANC. So it is necessary for us to introduce the private sector into the running of railways, into the management of power. Of course, we have to overhaul our education system. And lastly, one of the huge handicaps that is actually contributing, ironically, to this huge salary increase for small groups is racial preferences. I think you all know about affirmative action, black economic empowerment, and all the rest of it. If, for example, if you look at what is happening to, if you read the Auditor General's report on the public sector, you have vacancies that are left open, unfilled, because there isn't a qualified black person. So the job doesn't get done. Now, that's one of the major handicaps that our public sector is faced with, and that our economy is faced with. So I think I have talked far more than I had intended to. Can I hand over to you, Scott? Thank you very much.